We are going to speak today about our stomach. Feeling sick to your stomach. That's the title of our episode.
From the space of excitement to the space of kind of like having that, deep kind of like wrenching feeling in your stomach when something goes wrong or when we're in fear, is quite interesting. But there's so much that connects into the digestive system that supports. And within spirituality, it's always usually when things are happening in the digestive system, it's usually a release. It's a letting go of something that's happening, or it's a holding on to something. So, for example, if we look at the different aspects, say, of, constipation, usually it's about somebody that tends to, sorry, no, I was going to say from a medical perspective, could you take us through the digestive system and what its function is within the body?
So it's
Okay.
plenty of time that we need to assign to, and fear is one of the emotions that triggers our digestive system. So
Hmm.
we didn't have too much time to adapt to the things that were happening, and the pace of the world is already in fast-paced mode. So that's why many people are having those stomach issues, whether they have ulcers, whether they have gastritis, whether they have leaky gut, whether they have.
But mom, you're going to be stuck with all of this food rotting for the next like 8 hours in your stomach, right? And that must give some sort of a mental, emotional effect. How
Mhm.
do you find that from the body?
From the mouth. It takes
Mm-hmm.
the esophagus, it takes all of this journey, let's say, and we are just loading our digestive system with food that probably also wasn't the healthiest choice when you were that is made up by, let's say, the policemen that are playing with the lights with sugary processed food, because that's the anxiety that is being created by the liberation of.
Which is so interesting that when you start looking at the sugar aspect of it, because the role in spirituality is that the gut is one of your intuition centers, and it also senses the internal body, keeping a smile on your face. Nobody knows, or what will people think? Holding on to things that we don't want to hold on to, holding on to the past, living in the past, rehashing those traumas, which is very interesting because we keep traumatizing the bodies with our thought processes every time we visit those traumas in the past that haven't healed.
And she pushes many times a lot of pressure on the child. Don't notice that doing that is just taking too much pressure on children when we demand of them. And as they are children, they don't know what to do, and what they do is that they suffer from stomach issues.
Waiting, playing with the food, and pushing it around and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's quite interesting that, as like you say, we don't know that we're doing harm. I think as we move forward and as we start to understand. However, I also believe that our food isn't as it has really, it's kind of like the scales have tipped way too far to one side, where now we find ourselves going back to that holistic way of living again. I mean, even I've been trying to make bread with like 3 ingredients, like being done with this kind of like processed.
Endless cycle of not sleeping well also, that is, let's say, as so that lack of energy translates into this anxiety in the morning. And when you are anxious, you what you usually eat is, I started this program, let's say, of intermittent fasting. It took more or less 2 months or almost 3 months, because I perform also more or less 1 hour and a half or sometimes 2 hours of exercise. And I said, well, I think I'm okay with two, because the third one for me it was complicated sometimes. And you will start to enjoy more life. So that will create a positive cycle.
I'd either be able to drink a ton and not feel any kind of spiritual work when I have alcohol in my system. But I started to notice how my body started to shift and how it started to change in order to be able to manage the energetic frequency that I was digesting at the time. And it's so funny because when I do big channeling sessions, I cannot go into it with a full that comes up with regards to how that awareness or that awakeness starts to actually affect your physical body, which I think to some extent is true, and which is why people bless food. And it doesn't matter whether it's meat or an apple or whatever it comes from, is the energy of the frequency of the people that have touched it or the circumstances to which the animal had, you know, died or been killed, or, you know, which is quite interesting when it comes to the aspect of where miss that. And a lot of the times we're starting to let go of these old habits that perhaps supported us in so many ways.
Sometimes I'm used to, because that was a custom from my childhood, to watch something, but now I choose to watch something that calms me and help. I
Mm-hmm.
don't usually watch things that stress me when I'm eating, and I usually don't want to talk about things that are complicated or emotional or all of those things. And I had a lot of opportunities to prove that when we are eating, when we are having a meal, and we have a difficult conversation, or the other person,
Creating a block to that, and I can totally see how it doesn't allow us to process yeah, our intuition. And then the root chakra, which is very interesting from that perspective, is related to our feelings of safety and grounding and feeling here. So sometimes when we don't have that feeling of feeling safe or feeling ground, we also tend to put on more weight because it grounds us. It makes us heavier in order to kind of like step into who we are, or, you know, kind of a thing, which
yes, yes, you were talking about the weight, and the weight that I see that many people gain many times is just, many times you can just answer to someone that asks you how are you feeling, and you say fine, or I'm good, or I'm okay, or that they don't want to listen to our problems, or that they don't have time to listen, or whatever. That society is changing in a way that many people is becoming more shielded.
tends to show up when it, and that again is also linked to the solar plexus chakra, which is all about your self-esteem.
It looks for an outlet, and it looks for uh, something so that you can pay attention. And
Mm,
all of the anger and all of the things that she had, and how she developed cancer, and how,
yeah,
why she developed cancer, and all of those ailments, you know.
yeah.
So if we just think about those things, it makes complete sense with what happens in the body. And when, I think we spoke about this like 2 or 3 episodes before, and speaking up our feelings and trying to express as much as possible. Yes, and that's the safest way for the public and the audience and anyone that doesn't want to hear you.
Absolutely. So get this. I was reading this article. I've still got it up here. There was a 17th century alchemist and physician. His name was Jan Baptist van Helmont, and he was born in like 1580 to 1644. He insisted that the process of emotion, perception, and imagination took place in the organs of the digestive system.
They are just connected in an intuitive way that I don't think that we will be able to understand into more detail in the next following years, in terms of the science, in terms of
And think that's a good way of actually monitoring that and checking in, as if this in alignment. I know we used to do a lot of kind of like muscle testing to see with food, but the beautiful thing is it's a beautiful map. Like say it's like mostly in our digestive system.
this is a perfect, I think, segue to speak about the ancestral lineage that we also carry, because I was remembering this documentary with Louise Hay that she spoke about her parents, And
Yeah.
that's something that I have also done in my life with my father, and things start to flow. And that doesn't mean, and I want to clarify, because many people can say, well, what if my father or what if my mother is too toxic to be around, in spite of.
In one sense, it's a reason why we chose that family, to release those patterns, to release that pain, to release that letting go of what you've been holding on to. Because forgiveness doesn't,
Mhm.
and a lot of the times, if we start to look at it in the sense of how did that support me, which I know is a weird way of looking at this, it's like you've needed that, but now that you don't need it anymore, you're ready to let go of it. And we've sat at the table. I like we tend to have dinner at the table, and like after dinner, like just talking about like, oh my goodness, I've just rediscovered this, that it was straight in my face. And then I give an example, and I'm like, and my mom lives with me. So it really is quite a beautiful understanding once we start looking at, okay, I've looked at this, I've forgiven this. How did it work for me? How did it make me into the person I am today? How did it change the direction in my life? You know, that I've heard stories that are like, oh my goodness, who would choose that? But I
Also, anger in my case served me in the purpose of being so independent and driven into what I wanted, but you need to release it, otherwise it starts to create problems
yep.
inside of you, and those problems are
What do you
20
say?
some.
Drink your food and chew your liquids because of the digestive enzymes that it starts to create. And you should actually chew your food at least 33 times. My grandmother used to tell me that before swallowing it, and it makes sense because then it becomes liquid. So you get to drink your food and chew your liquid because it allows you to absorb those vitamins. You know you've released that situation when you're no longer triggered. Look for support. Find the practitioners, find the friends that are ready to listen to you, that can you can voice your feelings to. And if you don't want to mix that with your friends, find a counselor or a psychologist or somebody that to support you, or some sort of a therapist. And then I find that craniosacral therapy is great for releasing modalities, or even EFT tapping. That tends to help release a lot of the trapped emotions that we are feeling. And sometimes we don't have to.
Also in my life. And I think that also that's what I do all now that I'm studying Reiki and doing this. I think
Beautiful.
we spoke about many areas. We cover plenty of ground. I'm just left to encourage people to speak to us, to tell our their own journey with emotions and the God.